zooming in from Western Washington University, located in the Pacific Northwest corner of the continental United States. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to the webinar series, A Month of Adventures, Reimagining a Tourism Future, sponsored by the Adventure Tourism Research Association. I want to acknowledge and thank all the folks who have contributed to this webinar series, including ATRA's steering committee and the many presenters here today. Special thanks to Yelena Farkic, who contributed in so many ways, including the organization, handling of logistics, and today for being our technology leader. So thank you so much. And also another big thanks to Dr. Steve Taylor for his continued leadership, vision, tireless work ethics, and just as importantly, his overwhelming kindness and boundless positivity. What a gift to work with you all. And today again is the first day of our 3-part webinar series. Thank you for zooming into today's webinar, Microadventures Exploring Your Backyard. We hope you will join us in the subsequent webinars on the 17th and 24th of November. So today I get to talk to you a little bit about Microadventures, and I get to introduce this session. And Microadventures Exploring Your Backyard is a growing trend and movement since 2016. When Alastair Humphrey's first coined the term, microadventures are adventures that are close to home, cheap, simple, short, and effective. According to Humphreys, they capture the essence of big adventures or traditional adventure travel that is characterized by the challenge, fun, the escapism, and the learning experiences and the excitement. Susan Mackenzie, my research partner, and I believe that microadventures may substitute for adventure travel. I think someone needs to mute themselves if possible. Or rather, microadventures may be a substitute for adventure travel, or rather the preferred means to adventurers believe that microadventures may produce the same benefits of adventure travel without the negative impacts that are often associated with it. Microadventures, like traditional adventure travel, may elicit personal transformation, enhance self-esteem, self-confidence, intrinsic motivation, resilience, well-being, and ecocentric perspectives. Furthermore, adventure travel answers the call for a more sustainable and ethical travel and tourism future. Because microadventuring occurring close to home, the greenhouse gas emissions are lower than traditional adventure travel, as you never set foot on a plane and you might use human, animal, or local powered transport instead of more fossil fuel means. Furthermore, the money that you spend stays in your local community and helps support local jobs and community engagement. Instead of romanticizing faraway places, you find the secrets and the beauty of your home environment and community. And adventure travel in your own yard reconceptualizes adventure for being out there, remote, time and resource intensive, to right here, local and attainable, and reflects broader calls for local vision, short distance, low carbon travel that retains the financial and social capital that Hollenhorst, Mackenzie, and Ogerstein called for back in 2014. For a moment, let us turn our eyes to the past, to the pre-pandemic, where traditional adventure travel was experiencing significant global growth. The adventure travel industry grew by 195% from 2010 to 2014 and was forecast to grow another 33% by 2023. And then when the worldwide pandemic lockdowns began, globally, 91% of the population experienced restricted movement, ranging from strict in China, Italy, and New Zealand, to more fragmented and laissez-faire approaches in Brazil and the USA. In the age of COVID-19, traditional adventure travel is not only more difficult, but unethical given the imminent threat it poses to humanity. This is not hyperbole, considering government admissions to refrain from activities involving heightened risk to remote environments, or such as backcountry skiing, mountain biking, and water-based activities. These restrictions were suggested to avoid straining our health systems or exposing emergency responders. Even today, here in the US, many hospitals throughout the country are still overflowing from COVID-related illnesses, making it difficult or impossible to serve patients with other illnesses or emergencies. As lockdowns were implemented and restrictions on adventure travel were realized, we saw creative microadventures flourishing in the most unlikely places. Sierra Club encouraged people to explore their backyard, not the backcountry. Local opportunities sprung up everywhere, and there were even guidebooks that revealed secret pathways connecting neighborhoods to green spaces. Neighborhood bear hunts sprung up internationally, and social media overflowed with images of backyard camping, and people were encouraged to skip the climbing crag and rig a station in their backyard. The pinnacle of microadventure creativity was epitomized by parents who built a homemade ski slope descending from their backyard treehouse, complete with pulley lifts to hoist children high up into the air. I know for me during lockdown, I engaged in the smallest of microadventures, such as growing flowers and food for the first time on my own property. And my adventure was really quite brilliant and fun, because I had never experienced playing in the dirt, tending a seed, and watching it grow into this lovely, beautiful flower that now to this day continues to nourish the hummingbird outside my window this morning as it comes to drink just before our winter sets in here in the Pacific Northwest. And I think that is one of the most brilliant things about microadventures is we often think about going into these grand places and faraway places, yet we can often experience the liminality in microadventures close to home by seeking out those secret spots, our undiscovered avenues, and the places that we never even know existed. And what I mean by liminality is this feeling that we often feel when we are traveling in these grand places around the world, where we step across our doorstep, across the threshold, and go to these faraway places where we may feel distant from home, free from the expectations, the judgments, the daily life, work. And we often think that we have to travel far, far distances and for a long time, just to feel that sense of being away or escapism. Yet research has shown that even on microadventures, once we get into the right frame of mind, when we are there and present within our communities, maybe looking under rocks or following the river close by to places we've never been before, we can often let reality of our ordinary lives slip away, and we can continue to feel the sense of being away in liminal experience, free from the expectations, and maybe encounter the rhythms of nature that we often don't feel when we are home during our typical daily lives. And so today we're going to optimistically envision what a post-pandemic adventure could look like, and why we may not only need to embrace microadventures, but why we may prefer them to traditional ones. The post-pandemic adventure calls for a back to basics approach, where we emphasize simplicity, personal skill development, immersion in nature, curiosity, and personal insight. And rather than pursuing more further away and faster with lots of technology, with advanced equipment, adventure can be built around the challenges and uncertainty and inherent in self-supported human travel like biking, rowing, and paddling and walking. And perhaps for some like myself, even gardening. Localism and microadventures present opportunities for enhanced community connections in local places by going deeper and not further. These approaches retain social, psychological, and financial capital for local benefit, something that is lost when community members invest psychological and financial resources in disparate and faraway communities. The pandemic has also helped us reconsider the true value and ethics of exotifying far-off lands and people, as opposed to creating enduring place attachment in our own communities. Again, those secret, understated local spots we never had time or energy to notice are suddenly of immense value. Small trails or green spaces we never made time to explore because we are imagining or engaging in grander adventures are now center stage in our minds. If the pandemic has done nothing else of value, hopefully it has revealed what our own bioregion has to offer and illustrated that fulfilling adventures can be found much closer than we thought. We have seen people through microadventures reprioritize how they spend their time, money, psychic energy, and efforts. These often enforce opportunities for reflection and contemplation afforded us to have a greater awareness of the intrinsic value of our immediate surroundings and slowing down and traveling at human speeds. Microadventures also provide more frequent adventure opportunities because they're shorter and closer to home and need less financial resources. Perhaps we could adventure more often. Maybe instead of every 6 to 18 months on average, we could do it weekly or monthly. And we may have enduring psychological benefits. The shifts in how we approach the world and the values we prioritize may mean we are not only forced to adopt microadventures, but we may prefer them. Proust long ago articulated a core philosophy underpinning of microadventures that the real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes. If we shift our frame of reference, we can find adventure closer to home than we imagined, and we can enhance well-being and reduce environmental impacts by focusing on microadventure experiences that are close by, low carbon, low consumption, and result in deeper connections to local people and places. If we can learn to seek adventure where we are, rather than in distant places, the outlook for post-pandemic adventure is really, truly hopeful. Thank you for listening to a little bit of my musings about microadventure and how we might reimagine our future. And I'm very excited to introduce our webinar presenters who will share their perspectives of microadventures and about exploring our backyard. Bo Miles will share his personal insights into the backyard adventure, meaningful and pointless expeditions, self-experiments, and the value of people's junk. This will not be a guidebook for the good life, nor will he preach about the importance of challenge and epiphanies, hardship and breakthroughs. Instead, he will share his thoughts of challenge and backyard adventuring, concocting meaningful events and experience that challenge him, redefine his childhood sense of the hero's journey, and force him to look intimately at everyday places and question how to live among others. Bo will talk to his book, The Backyard Adventure, namely in relation to the key aspects of the book that have been most attractive to his audiences since May 2021. Quite simply, his book is a set of stories told by a red-headed bloke. Following Bo will be Jill Pomfret, Carola May, and Manuel Sand. They will present their study of how adventures affect well-being, a systematic literature review. The research project reflects a new approach to understanding adventure participants by focusing on the beneficial outcomes of adventure participation, particularly oriented around well-being. And Dario Perez Bruncardi and Lucia Benito will present Little Explorers, Outdoor Reconnections during COVID-19's confinement and deconfinement. When the state of alarm in Spain confined children and classrooms to home in March 2020, early childhood education suffered a severe setback. However, resilient teachers did not give up looking for a way for their pupils to reconnect with the outdoors through their windows, as the Spanish Network for Outdoor Physical Education proposed a balance to nature's deficit disorder. And finally, but not least, Tina Irving will present Can Peat Contribute to Adventure Tourism? She will share her insights about Scottish Highland ponies and the short journey on horseback that were commonplace in the days of yore, especially for getting the peat in. So again, thank you so much to all of you who are here today, and a special thanks to the presenters. And so we're so excited to hear your insights. And first up today will be Bo Miles. And audience members, please feel free to add your comments and your questions to the chat box. I see that many of you have already found it. If you still don't know where that is, if you look at the bottom of your screen, right in the middle should be an icon that says chat, and it has a little bit of a bubble for making a thought. Feel free to click on that and leave your comments and your questions there. And we will make sure that you will have time after each person presents. For 10 minutes, you will all have a time to ask your questions and hear answers from the presenters. And then we will also take a short break at about the close of the hour in between after the first two presenters. And then we'll finish up at the second hour with our last presenters and more time for questions. Thank you very much, and take it away, Bo.
Thank you, Jasmine. I hope everyone can hear me well enough, and I'll plug on. I've always enjoyed your work, Jasmine, and you've summarised things beautifully. A little bit about me and where I am before I crack on. I've got 4 things to talk to you about, so there's only a couple of minutes for each point. The Backyard Adventure, here's my book here with the dog ears all over the place. It's only been out 4 or 5 months, and the abstract that Jasmine read out about the attractive aspects of this book since it came out 5 or 6 months ago, there's really only probably one attractive thing I'll talk about in the next few minutes, and the rest are I suppose, a bit more critical. And that harps back to my ex-life as a university worker, and I no longer am. So I'm coming to you this morning from 20 past 4 a.m. in the morning in Australia in a garden shed that I used to make films now. So I'm no longer in the academic space, and I'm somewhat liberated by that. And yet I miss it incredibly too. I miss the academy, or miss university life for its sense of teaching and connection with humans. But what it does tell you and me, as I talk to you this morning from all over the world, I see you all, is that I have this real counterpoint. I had a 10-year life not too long ago that was very much one thing, and I'm now another. And in some respects, you might say backyard adventuring, or this concept of micro adventuring, is this great counterpoint. Jasmine summarised it beautifully, all the benefits of this potential idea of backyard adventuring as opposed to traditional or grand adventuring. What I can tell you from my perspective as someone who is I'm not an overly smart man, but I'm a doer. I'm very practical, and I tend to do lots of things. My day is very full, and not always with being in front of a screen, although it's hard to avoid that, the busier we are sometimes. But the 4 things I'd like to talk to you about, and I'll probably end early because I'd love to have this as more of a conversation. But I think the great, I suppose, counterpoint to backyard adventuring is how it makes us pressurize stories and this essence of stories and what they mean to us. In many respects, anything we ever do in life is a story, whether it be having a cup of coffee or climbing a mountain. They're all going to be translated in some way down the path. And of course, unlike a cup of coffee and a mountain top, is that one tends to be told more than the other because one is more commonplace. I write about in my book about the analogy of time, distance, and in a sense, stock footage. So my 5-month expedition around Africa becomes a 50-minute film, and it's in many respects it's still just a chapter in my book, and yet it took 5 months to create this essence of a story. Whereas I can go on a so-called backyard adventure, and it takes a day to shoot or 2 days to shoot. It's a 20-minute film, but it's still a chapter in a book. It can be unpacked with the same depth that Jasmine talked about earlier. That's a real liberating thing for someone who expects to only have one life on this planet. It's bang for buck in many respects. So I think this whole idea of pressurizing stories with this great counterpoint is really important. The second point I've got is that somewhat negative that I alluded to earlier, rather than the attractive. So my book is, it's really only just gone out to a global audience. It was very much an Australian, New Zealand centric audience for a few months before it's been picked up by another publisher. And some of the negative aspects to the backyard adventurer, my book, are that it's very much too I-centric. Beau's talking about his ruminations out there in a ditch or up a tree or whilst going around my block, which was an interesting bit of feedback. And I get it. I get why this is the case, because in many respects, I'm having to be a selfish counterpoint of myself whilst doing these smaller, I suppose, less exotic things, because it doesn't have those great impacts or these great vistas that potential traditional adventurers had. So I found that quite interesting. That came up a bit in some of the good read reviews and some such that you have. Page 2. This is probably the great critique of the so-called backyard adventure, in that it is often people from very, I suppose, privileged backgrounds that are maybe switching to the idea of backyard adventuring, or even talking about it or writing about it, like myself. I have had the great luxury, I've been very lucky to have spent 15 years being anywhere but my backyard as an adult, to now have this great counterpoint to want to do those very things in my backyard. And so that comes up a lot. I do lots of talks and lectures, and not academic ones these days, about how people can get bang for buck in their backyard. And I will often get asked, well, Beau, you've had another life as a grand adventurer, or doing traditional classical type adventures of mountaintops and wide seas and deserts and whatnot, to go in search of now in the ditch behind your house, or in a river that is sick, or some such. So it's worth considering when we often take now our 20-year-old students on trips as a backyard adventure, and they have to take with them a great swag of imagination, because they don't have, in a sense, the toolkit that the privileged people teaching backyard adventuring might have to kind of get that sense of perception. Point 3 would be from me that we can still really make the backyard adventure seem very romantic as well. And I really like the idea of it being practical. For example, just a great backyard adventure might still do something that is mundane and gets you places, like a commute to work. I've done a bunch of these when I was still working for a workplace as such. And ultimately I still ended up at work, which was mighty practical. Sure, I was 3 or 4 days late, but it still got me to a place. And I love that aspect of the practical nature that you can make a backyard adventure. Give the backbone to a backbone adventure, something that practical nature. And I think that goes back to just human travel over many thousands of years. And I think that's a nice harp back. My last point, in fact, I've got 2 small micro points to finish off with, fittingly. Food adventures don't often get talked about in the realm of backyard adventuring. And that lovely metaphor of the universe looking much the same through a telescope as the cells of our body look through a microscope. Food adventures can be incredibly powerful. I ate nothing but beans for 40 days several years ago, and it was the most insightful thing I've ever had about humanity, and in a sense myself, and persecution of food, and just how lucky a well-balanced diet is. Maybe in a sort of metaphorical way, like a well-balanced adventure is. And so when you fiddle with the ingredients of things, golly, you don't have to spend, it's almost the reverse of not spending any money. It's very much tapping into the survival instincts of life, and questioning what the point of life is too. It was quite remarkable. So food adventures, I think, is a huge realm to be fiddled with. And I suppose too, lastly, before I talk to folks, is that I'm not sure adventuring, you know, we talk about adventure often as something that we do on weekends, or we do every 6 months, or we do to reward ourselves as a mechanism. I never turn adventuring off. I'm always an adventurous sort, much like maybe a 10-year-old kid. I'm not sure it's the sort of thing that you do on weekends or on Monday to Friday, or you turn it on and off like you would vegetarianism. And so in many respects, always adventuring, I think, is the hallmark of successful backyard adventuring when we're critical of it and when we do it. And so I think that's worth considering. These are all things that I would have written about if I was still in the world of academia, and now do them in a practical sense in front of a screen. And it's different and it's quite liberating in a sense too, but it's much the same in terms of its critical nature.
Bo, you have 1 minute left.
Yeah, thank you. Well, that's perfect because I've wrapped up. There's my 4 pages of handwritten notes here in the early morning of Australia. So yeah, thanks for listening, and I'll be happy to have a yarn to folks for the next 4 or 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Bo. That was really amazing listening about your transition from academia to what I'd like to say the real world, and continue to be an adventurer, and reminding us about all the many different ways that microadventure could occur, including those food adventures, which I haven't spent much time thinking about. So thank you for that. Folks in the audience, I want to make sure that we open up this time for you to ask questions. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask, or if you're a little uncomfortable talking out loud, feel free to write your questions in the chat, and I'm happy to ask them for you myself. Tova, I see your hand.
Yeah, thank you. So fun hearing you people talk again about your micro adventures, and also how nice that you've now published them in a book. I can't wait to read it. But I still want to come back to a basic question, and that is, what is essential for you in order for something to be called an adventure?
Hi, Tova. Yeah, great to see you again after many years. What I got from that, I got a garbled bit of audio through there, but so you're still after the essence of adventure for me, for micro adventuring or backyard adventuring. I suppose that is the tension, because am I searching for the essences of what I had in grand adventures in micro adventures or backyard adventures? I don't think so. I think I'm looking for something very different. I'm always fundamentally trying to satisfy curiosity, but that's also a very disciplined pastime to be curious, especially as an adult, because we get so wrapped up in not being as curious anymore. In some respects, you have to try and continually prove it yourself wrong. I'm watching my 2-year-old daughter grow up at the moment, and she's the smartest thing I've ever met, because she constantly improves and has a feedback loop that is live and always willing to be wrong and always willing to be improved. And I think the older we get, the less we do of that. Great adventuring, I think, is to constantly try and prove yourself wrong by going and doing things that you would ordinarily think are mundane or ordinary or less exotic, etc. So it's quite an active perception, and it's almost hoodwinking yourself. And the more of it you do, the more satisfying your backyard can be, and therefore adventure.
Are there other questions for Bo? Tova, do you have another?
Well, I just thought that if so is it the case that we had this idea before of making the ordinary extraordinary, but is it about and I love this idea of the curiosity is the curiosity. Is it also about So instead of making the ordinary extraordinary, is it about making the certain uncertain?
Yeah, perhaps it is. You know, one of the key things I do now in my scripting, and if I was to turn my laptop around, I've got a giant chalkboard to my left that is full of film ideas, and each one has a script associated with it. The script is as basic as I can make it. They're all lacking research, and they all lack research because the more I research an idea, the more I know about it, and the less curiosity I tend to associate with that idea. And so it's going against our Googling instincts to do lots of preparatory work. Think of an outdoor program typically at a school or a university, and how much rigor goes into the framework, the safety management, etc. for that. I think what that often does is cheat us out of the unexpected and maybe problems. There's always problems. And I think problems are wonderful. They can be done in a safe way. But yeah, it's to try and I suppose have that lens of a child climbing a tree or going to a backwaters or doing something that is very local to them because that's what's available to them, and to try and, I suppose, overlay to this adult mindset, which is so complexly fuddled with adulthood. It's a really hard, I suppose, reverse engineering of the adult complexity, and I'm coming to terms with that too. And my 2-year-old daughter is a great window into that.
Thank you, Bo. We have another question, and it's in the chat. I believe it's from Al Hardwick. Would you say that adventure, grand or micro, is less to do with the adventure itself and more to do with the person's attitude? That's a great question.
It is absolutely. And the difficulty with that, Al, is that adults are very smart, and we know this. And so it's all very well to convince ourselves that going and sitting in a plantation forest without a view, with mosquitoes in unideal temperatures, can give you that same sense of something that we're after. And these are X factors, or these are essences of our motivations that are very hard to pin down. It's all very well to think these things, but then to go and actually do it, and to sit there happily, or to be task orientated while there and do it and repeat those kind of things. So the attitude I think we have, then it's the act of actually willingly and in reality enjoying those things while you do it. And that's very hard. So that I think so anyway. From my perspective, you have to be very, I suppose, disciplined to look at those smaller things or abstract things or backyard things as being the exotic things we know exist, especially when we have the means to go and do them. So yeah, the attitude thing is one, but then yes, you have to believe that your attitude can be won out.
Jill, do you have a question?
Just a quick question, actually, Bo. Thanks, really great presentation. You talked about food adventures being really, really powerful, and your bean experience, which I don't know whether I could do that for 40 days. Absolutely not. But you said it was an area of growing interest, and I was just curious as to what direction that would take. Is it about that, or is it about going foraging for food and having locally grown food? What is it about, please?
I think all of those things, Jill, they're great. I mean, they're great things to incorporate into programs, is foraging and questioning food and what we eat and where we get our calories from, and then how we spend our calories. And I know that in Australia, for example, a lot of people want to try and self-propel themselves with whatever they can forage for across the mountains or across a vast body of water or whatnot. It is very hard to adventure like we have, I suppose, classically, or what we do in school programs or in tourism to get calories. It's very hard to get calories from the natural world in many varieties and ways by going through different geographies and landscapes. And so, yeah, the food thing is fascinating. I suppose what most fascinates me about food is just how global we are with it now, and how expectant we are of having so many complex things in such a minute portion. I think it's staggering. I've got a film project coming up next month where myself, my sister, and a good friend of mine, we take 3 foods each on an island for 5 days, and we really unpack the complexity of these foods. And we all have these sort of island food conundrums that we turn around around a campfire. What foods would you have for the next 50 years? That fascinates me hugely, and not from a nutritional point of view, but from we're so lucky to have such a mass diversity of food. And when you strip those back, it can reveal things about ourselves that you would never have thought. Because look, I know with my bean experiment, it got to a point where it made me realize that life is food, and we all say that, but we don't. But it's such an easy thing to say but not feel. And when you strip away food or really experiment with it, it's the most powerful thing I've ever done. And so I think there's huge potential there in the adventuring realm.
Thank you both. That was really excellent. And great question, Jill. I believe that it is now time, is that right, Helena, to change to our next presenter? Yeah, okay, thank you so much. So up next we have Jill Promfret, Carola May, and Manuel Sanz, who will talk about how adventures affect well-being, a systematic literature review. Jill is Associate Professor in Tourism at Sheffield Hallam University. Her research interests include consumer behavior in adventure tourism, and her current focus is on the beneficial outcomes of adventure activity participation, particularly those related to well-being. And Carola is Professor of Tourism Management at IU International University. Her current research focuses on the production of social-cultural tourism, spaces, outdoor adventure tourism, and nature-human relations. And Manuel is Professor for Outdoor Sports and Adventure Management at University Applied Management in Germany. His research interests include adventure tourism, mountain bike tourism, well-being and adventure activities, nature protection, and outdoor sports, and the effects of experiential learning in the outdoors. So I'm very excited to hear about this systematic review. So take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Jasmine. It's great to be back reunited with the Atra family and to see so many familiar faces, and and to at least read the corresponding names in some cases. We're very happy to be able to present our research today, which actually started at one of the adventure conferences, but I'll talk about that in a bit. And this is work in progress, but we're really happy to show you our first results today and to discuss them with you later on. We really look forward to hearing what you think of our findings. And because we have a lot of findings to show, I'll try to just jump in and be as quick as possible, giving the introduction and spend more time on the results themselves. Just see that I can see the whole slide. Oops, sorry. Just trying to, yeah, make myself small in terms of the video. Great. Just a little bit about the context. Jasmine, you already mentioned a lot about the COVID-19 pandemic and microadventures, and I think all over the world, a lot of people rediscovered nature and going outside, having a walk, wherever it was possible. And I think that even enhanced the trend of going outside. Microadventures were the only possibility to travel and a great opportunity just to go outside, and also a great opportunity to enhance the well-being. Just a quick note that we probably won't talk about Microadventures too much in the next slides, but I think there's so much that is really so closely connected to Microadventures that it really fits into the session, and we're really happy to present here. And yeah, adventure activities, adventure tourism have a lot of positive effects on mental health and well-being. Being outside in nature is really beneficial, especially if combined with exercise. And yeah, hospitals where there's a lot of green and plants, people get healthier even quicker and stuff like that. So there's a lot of research about that, but not that much in the field of adventure tourism, but we thought we will have a closer look on how well-being is discussed in the adventure tourism literature. And a few of you might remember Carola and I presented in Scotland a couple of years back when we last met in person about our research, where we looked at abstracts from the adventure tourism conferences. So this is the previous ones, and we thought it would be great to have a look at the whole research on adventure tourism. So we try to find benefits and main themes of well-being and benefits in the literature. We try to see what theories are existing and on what kind of findings we could find in existing literature. And then at the moment, we try to categorize these findings into a conceptual framework. We'll present where we are at the moment and what kind of implications we think this will have for adventure tourism, but also for future research. And we hope that there will be a lot of contributions in the near future. And I already mentioned our preliminary research. Carola and I looked at the abstracts from the adventure conferences. We came up with 6 categories or main themes at that stage. At the moment, we only have 5 left. Those were liminality, space and place, identity, existential self-positioning, psyche, and cognitive skills. So these were the main aspects on or positive outcomes of adventure travel that we could find within those abstracts from the previous conferences. And talking about the abstracts, if you're interested in that research, you can still find that on the ADRA website, and I'm not going into more detail right here. And we'll hand over to Jill, over to Sheffield for our systematic literature review.
Thanks, Manuel. Hi, everyone. Yeah, so just briefly take you over the second stage of our research, which was to carry out a systematic literature review. And what we did in this review was look at key words related to adventure benefits and well-being within the existing literature. And we took a PRISMA approach, which is preferred reporting items for systematic review and meta-analysis. And that's been applied to several different adventure-related studies in recent years, and also has been specifically adapted from a medical protocol to a tourism and hospitality protocol for use for systematic reviews in tourism and hospitality. So we went forward and searched the different databases that you see there, the 5 different databases. Scopus and Web of Science are the 2 biggest ones, and we use certain keywords and key terms to carry out that search. Next slide, please. And this is just a model or a diagram of the completed protocol or PRISMA approach. So it goes through 4 different stages, which are on the left-hand side. So initially identifying the relevant literature using the keywords related to adventure, well-being and benefits. And we looked at research from January 1990 to February 2021 to just see what the scope of research was in relation to adventure benefits and well-being. We then went through a screening process, eligibility process, where we excluded certain articles and research notes and duplications according to whether there was sufficient or insufficient focus on adventure for example. And also if the articles were very industry focused, then we took those out. If they were on pedagogy, we took those out as well. And in the end, basically, we ended up with 125 articles and book chapters, which we went forward with in a thematic coding analysis, which is the next slide. So in the next thematic coding, we went through 3 stages of reading the articles, reading the abstracts, the introductions, the methodologies and the key findings, most importantly. And we started to code them according to different colours and according to codes we'd already set up in an Excel spreadsheet, which were from the preliminary research that Carola and Manuel did, as well as some new ideas and themes of codes we had from our own research experience in adventure and adventure tourism. So I'm not going to take you through the different stages in detail, but hopefully the diagrams explain how we colour coded, how we refined. In the second stage, we went from having certain themes, subcodes, and then dividing them up into further sub-themes, such as with mental health and emotional was the sub-theme, and the reduced stress and balance and clearness were further sub-themes. And then we produced some meta-themes, which we'll move on to in the next slide. So I'm going to just present a very short overview of our key findings, and then Carola will continue with those. So we had these 5 meta themes, which you can see in the inner circle. So community, personal development, immersion, physical and mental balance, and extraordinary experiences. And then we had 16 sub-themes related to each of those meta themes. So for instance, in terms of extraordinary experiences, we see here in pink that we've got optimal flow peak experiences, transcendental experiences, and natural highs. And so compared with our preliminary research, we found that some of the sub-themes of physical health, challenge and flow appeared a lot more often in this second stage of the research compared to the abstract analysis. And some new themes emerged, which were flourishing, beneficence and natural highs. And so we looked at all those in a bit more detail and provided a quantitative overview of these 5 meta themes, which Carola will now start to talk about. So over to Carola. Thank you.
Maybe I can just add, sorry, Jill, just the more often the themes were mentioned, the bigger they are in the diagram. So just that you know how to read them. So Carola, it's over to you. Sorry.
Okay, thank you, Jill and Manuel. So let's have a look at the meta themes. There were 3 key sub themes which reflected personal development, highlighting the importance of adventure activities to individuals' learning or knowledge acquisition, individual identity, and flourishing. Flourishing is, in brief, about life going well and reflects a high level of well-being and vitality from learning new things and enjoying me time to meet individual growth needs. Being challenged and facing unpredictable situations through adventures help individuals to form and stabilize their identity and develop their self-esteem and confidence. Next one. The community meta theme is about how adventure experiences can create a sense of community from collective identity and beneficence. Such experiences connect and reconnect individuals to a collective identity, which is based on shared values and beliefs and generates a powerful sense of we. Being in natural environments, which are often fragile, as we know, can lead to individuals wanting to have positive impact on the lives of other people through engaging in pro-social and environmentally conscious behavior. This is known as beneficence, and it enhances psychological well-being. The theme, or the meta theme, immersion and transformation, is about transformational experiences from immersion in nature, embodiment, slowing down, and escaping from everyday environments and routines. Anti-structural experiences and liminality are about escaping from everyday life and trying something new. Individuals seek such experiences to break away from the overstructured, so-called nanosecond culture we live in. Deceleration and mindfulness are connected with, or are concerned with slowing down, freeing your mind, living in the present, and enjoying what is happening when it is happening. So living in the here and now of lived experiences. Human nature is about how nature is dynamic and unpredictable, and how it challenges individuals and encourages self-perception and self-expression through active engagement.
Carola, you have 1 minute left. Thank you.
Oh, I will hurry up. So connecting with nature, adapting to its forces in rhythm and resonance, that is to say, being deeply affected by nature, influence feelings of emotions and transformation. So I hand over to Manuel now.
1 minute.
1 minute is not much.
Seems to be a bit of a micro adventure for me now, but yeah, I'll try to talk you through.
You can take 2 minutes.
Thank you. I think physical and mental balance is, I probably don't have to explain that much, because I think you can understand most of the words there. So there's a lot about mental health, emotional balance, being finding your inner middle and being at ease with yourself. There's a lot of mention about physical effects of adventure, sports and adventure activities. Of course, adventure is about challenge and overcoming challenge and exposing yourself to a risk, but managing to cope with the risk. And in doing so, the coping and the resilience is strengthened. Didn't see Karen around, but she did some great work on adventure and coping. And then last but not least, we have the extraordinary experiences. There were a lot of mentions about flow, but also about optimal and peak experiences. Substances that are set free within ourselves that give us a drug-like feeling that we call the natural highs. And then there's this feeling of being part of something bigger, being at home somewhere. That's the category transcendental experiences and all. So this is work in progress, as I said, and we hope to have a contribution on the subject. And I think there's a lot that applies to micro adventures, and there's so many positive, beautiful things that come out of having adventures and overcoming those challenges that I mentioned. And it's great to know that we can go to our backyard, as Bo mentioned, or just go outside where we live and have these really small adventures and to have these positive effects out of them. Unfortunately, there were only 3 papers that mentioned micro adventures. I just had another look yesterday. So I think we have to do a lot of research on micro adventures and positive effects of micro adventures. And Jill, you're the one who's got the last word.
Oh, have I? Oh, good. No. So yeah, I mean, this is just the first stage in our research, doing a systematic literature review. And after that, we're planning to obviously develop a conceptual framework. And I know others are doing research in this general area as well. But hopefully ours will add something different. And then we're planning to really carry out some empirical research and looking at different groups of adventurers and perhaps looking at case studies of Germany and the UK and perhaps further afield as well, to find out whether these themes that we've found in the existing literature actually are still important, or how important they are to adventure participants in those countries. So that's what we're aiming to do. So it's just a starting point, really. Yeah, we'd welcome any comments and questions that you have. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Manuel, Jill, and Carola. Such fascinating work, and I can't believe that there are only 3 microadventure studies. And yes, so we need to get more out there, more published. we have time for questions from the audience. All right. Thank you, Tova.
You need to. Yeah.
Thank you. It's fun to read. You know, we had one on this path earlier at the conference, and it's nice to see it return to and to see it actually really built on this systematic review. And there's two things I want to ask. The one is, we had this one bullet point at the end with differences between abstracts and the literature are worth noting. And I'm wondering, is there something that our conference is not covering that it should, that we should maybe actively asking for more people to contribute to, or other things in the literature that you feel are missing that the conference brings?
Sorry, Tove, I'm struggling to understand. I think it's just quite a bad audio. But is your question about whether the research that we've looked at in terms of the existing literature is different to what we found, what Manuel and Carola found in the first stage in the abstract conference?
You said that.
Yeah.
That I want to know how it's different, and if you think the conference should accommodate that.
Yeah.
And if the literature should.
Yeah, I suppose we need to do a bit further analysis, but there were a couple of the themes that I mentioned, like themes like flourishing and beneficence. I mean, I think flourishing kind of brings in a lot of different characteristics like positive emotions and feeling all is well with life and things. So I think there probably are some links there with the preliminary abstract conference analysis. It's just that we decided that we would try and get more academic and give it a term called flourishing, which obviously has been written about by other researchers. It just seemed to fit. But yeah, there are definitely some differences which we probably need to kind of work on a bit more. I mean, physical health, I think, was one thing that came up in the conference abstract, didn't come up in the conference abstracts and came up more in the existing literature, which is why we decided we would have that as one of the kind of related to the meta themes. We did kind of discuss these meta themes in quite a lot of detail, and we did talk about how the preliminary research was slightly different or sometimes the same as what evolved from the existing literature. And maybe Manuel and Carola want to add to that, because they did the preliminary research, so I had no role to play in that.
Yeah, I would like to add that as you mentioned already, the whole beneficence and community aspect, I think that has been a little bit under that hasn't been very well researched in the contributions of the years before the pandemic. I think that is something that is a little bit new now, that people are more aware that if they are interacting with nature in fragile spaces, that they also have to protect these spaces, and that they want to somehow to teach others or to tell other people how fragile these spaces are, and how enriching it is to interact with these spaces. So this is really something that I think we should study and research a little bit more. And I think another aspect which I find interesting is that the concept of anti-structure and liminality has been used in studies before, but it is still very modern, or still very one uses it very often. And so I think it is very important still to look at adventure and tourism activities that mirror a little bit the current state of our societies, if you understand what I mean.
Thank you, Carola. There's a question in the chat about if we had published something already. We are currently, as Jill wrote, writing it up, and it was great to be able to do this presentation just to keep things going forward. And there was another question about flourishing. If you could speak a bit more about flourishing, Jill or Carola, who wants to be the experts on flourishing?
I'm just oh, okay, right, yeah, flourishing. So just trying to find where we kind of looked at that a bit more. Yeah, it's all about, really, flourishing is all about life going well, and it very much reflects a very high level of subjective well-being and vitality and energy in life, and that is really achieved through learning new things. So it's about, in the context of adventure and adventure tourism, it's about learning and developing new skills, really, and it's very much focused around personal development and developing your identity, and also enjoying time for yourself through doing adventure activities, taking that time out, which actually links quite well, I think, with the micro adventure idea, where if we want to flourish on a consistent basis, then maybe we should be doing, as you mentioned, a few of you have mentioned, you need to be doing these micro adventures on a regular basis to sustain this feeling of flourishing and growing and personally developing. That's kind of partly what my view is, and our view, but also what the literature perhaps says, not in relation to micro adventures, but just in relation to, you know, this concept of flourishing. Hopefully that kind of addresses the question a little bit. Yeah, hopefully it does. Yeah.
Tova, you're up, and because your audio is a little tough to hear, could you speak a little more slowly or add in a few keywords to the chat? And you are muted, so please unmute yourself.
So this list of themes are very positive, right?
Yeah.
And I just want to put on the table perhaps the idea of the seduction of adventure, because I'm working now with people who are doing backcountry skiing and decision making in avalanche territory. And it might be the case that these very things are the things that cloud our judgment, and we're in dangerous situations. And so is this maybe overly positive, what we're publishing, as should we be aware of the seduction of adventure?
It's a good point, which I think we'll all have views on. And you know, we've had this discussion before while we've been doing this research. We've been saying, well, all we're looking at are well-being related themes. We're not actually looking at ill-being and you know, the more negative sides of adventure. Although obviously when we look at themes that relate to eudaimonic well-being, where challenge and actually overcoming adversity are part of the well-being journey, I suppose. And so there are negative aspects of approaching or getting to that feeling of well-being through eudaimonic well-being. But yeah, in terms of this ill-being, we started to put down some phrases that we found in the papers and the articles related to ill-being, but then we've kind of set that aside a little bit. It is interesting, and it's got me thinking maybe we should be looking at the, you know, the less seductive sides of adventure, and maybe look at those more negative aspects to maybe provide a more balanced paper. But I guess it all comes into how we introduce the paper and its value, really, because most of the literature skips over those negative aspects, and there's very little mention of the term ill-being in the literature as well. So you know, but it's a really good point. Thank you. I'm sure Manuel and Carola have got things to say about that as well.
Just want to add that at one stage I was realizing that we only looked at the positive effects, and I included in our spreadsheet, I included the negative effects, and I think we only had like 2 aspects written there, and they were not really themes; they were just sentences that talked about negative aspects. So yeah, but I think that that's something we should look at in our article once we've written that there are also negative sides of adventure, and maybe they should be also researched, because we didn't find anything on that actually. And if someone knows about them, please let us know.
But if I can add something, I think, for example, flow experiences or resonance, to feel really close to your own inner nature in interacting with outer nature. This depends highly on aspects like knowing your own limits. And so, of course, I think that the negative aspects of adventure are part of our research, because if you don't respect these limits of positive experiences that you can have by interacting with dynamic spaces, then you just don't have these positive effects neither. You know what I mean? So in fact, you can't deny also to speak about this potential negative aspects. So if we speak about flow, we think maybe also about rush. And if we speak about rush, we are close, we enter this discussion, where does it end? Yeah, positive effects, and where can rush turn into something very negative, or something like a drug where you really want always more, but then we are not in the area of positive effects of adventurous activities outdoors anymore. Yeah, so that is I think very important that we always have this in mind. I hope I hope that was understandable. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a fascinating discussion and systematic review. And I'm so excited to see your follow-up studies as well, because these questions are just fascinating. There's still so much we just don't know. If we could hold questions until the end of the webinar, because we still have 2 more presentations to hear today. And so I'd like to turn the time over soon to Dario Perez Brunicardi, and again, I apologize for mispronouncing people's names, and Lucia Benito, Faculty of Education in Sonjovia in Spain. And they'll be talking today about Little Explorers, outdoor reconnections during the COVID-19 confinement and deconfinement. And they will share the story of when the state of alarm in Spain confined children in classrooms to home. So thank you very much, and I will turn the time over to you.
Thank you, Jasmine, and hello. I'm very happy to see you again, and we are speaking from Spain. Maybe you remember a lot of people, something like that. Okay, here you are, a little study case about a very special period in all of the world, and in Spain too. We are Lucia and Dario, and maybe in 10 minutes we try to explain you a very special period for the young children.
Good afternoon. Okay, we start. Once upon a time, there was an early childhood education teacher, a trained teacher, as I was, and 25 pupils shared this experience together from February to June. This school has a proactive patio vivo. It is a pun in Spanish. Patio is the scholar yard and vivo is life. It's like Tío Vivo is a carousel, Patio Vivo is a nature scholar yard where the kids can play. This innovative project aimed to achieve a change in the spaces of the school playground and this way of being used.
But suddenly the coronavirus came into our lives and everything stopped. And a new period in the schools coming. One of these was the first period from March in Spain on 17th of March, coming the special period. Everybody goes to home and nobody can go out, and the schools close in that period. The teacher and Lucia have to make a new style of education for the little children. They are at home, they can't go out, and this is a very odd period. And the second period was the outdoor classroom, when the children can go out for a few minutes, for only 1 hour a day, and they can come back to the school.
In the first period, the teacher bases her classes on the RevNat infographic in order to propose different activities. RevNat is the Spanish network for outdoor physical education. And in the picture, we can see 4 areas which help us combat the lack of nature: our brain, our senses, our body, and the windows. And RevNat suggested some proposals to work with H1. In this slide, for example, you can see a child imagining and creating different landscapes. Every day, the teacher sent an audio to the family group in the form of an assembly. She told them proposals prepared for that day and different basic notions that normally took place in daily classroom assemblies. For example, in this slide, we can see several photos of the children developing their senses. First the taste, second the smell, and the sight finally. And all these kind of examples that you can see in the presentation were practiced by the group of 3-year-olds and their families. This and many more help children to develop their autonomy, something essential at this age, as Tonucci said in a conference during the confinement. For example, they learn to make recipes, to make their beds, to fasten buttons, to create a garden, and all these experiences were shared among the students' families by WhatsApp with some photos. And every day, the teacher opened her window and told the class different things that she saw while she was sending the audio. These audios were wonderful and had a high pedagogical value. And this ad was a helpful example for many class families. Overall, the disadvantaged families that also open their windows when they listen to the audio as if they were with the teacher in this moment.
The key factor in this period was the teacher attitude. She proposed to the students to some activities based of this infographic, and the teacher worked with the families giving the support and the methodological guidelines with the essential and this hard process. In fact, for families, the constant and daily support of the teacher was that they valued the most. All this shows the importance of social, emotional, and mental dimension of preserving contact with the outdoors. In the second period, remember, the children can go out for 1 hour, only 1 hour a day, and they can reconnect with the outdoors. But you know, the people was very in trouble. Maybe they have people not feel very well, and when the schools are still closed, the progressive opening of the confinement allowed the children to go out for the walks. In Spain, they say walks because they don't play in the slides, or they don't play in the swings. They only go for a walk, and the families can go out for 1 hour a day in a special time for walking, only for walking. And the children and their families discover a new way to discover the surroundings. Worries and the desire to get out were maybe the unstable balance. They are worried and they want to go out, and it was very difficult time for them. But the teacher and the other people in the school can make a methodology to reconnect with the outdoors. In this second period, the key factor was the teacher collaboration. During this period, the teacher, the training teacher, and the music teacher carry out a wonderful project. During their works, the pupils and their parents looked for different tutors, very simple tutors. In addition, a brief film was created combining drama, artistic creation, creativity, music elements, and the nature itself. The everyday adventures transform the daily uncertainty is very difficult for us, into a magical experience, far from the virus and close to the nature. This is the most important feeling and things in that period.
So what have we learned from this experience? Three main things, three important things. The first, the importance of the outdoor environment. The second thing, the importance of exploring the outdoors throughout childhood. And the third, the importance of guidance by the teachers and guided by the families. So guided by the teacher and accompanied by their families, these school children manage to maintain the illusion of learning, to mitigate the fear of coronavirus infection, to regain a certain normality in their lives, to make up for technological and indoor life, to make themselves active and to be healthier. So in short, they want to restart their normal lives with these little things.
And at the end, this little explorer infects their families, because when that situation changed in the next year, we can appreciate maybe one or two things. One of that was driving the project to transform and renaturize their schoolyard again and reconnect with the patio vivo. You remember the project at the big before the coronavirus pandemic. And second, increasing the interest in nature, leisure with the families. For example, usually goes with the families to run, to bike, to walk. Before that situation, not usually go to do it. And currently, the teacher continues with the work in this with them. And then
no more. Thank you for your time, and we invite you to be like these little explorers.
Thank you very much. That was a wonderful presentation, and I love the idea of helping children transform these feelings of uncertainty to magic, and helping them feel far away from a virus and close to nature. I just think that is one of the most beautiful things that I've heard today. So thank you very much. We have some time for questions. Who would like to ask? Again, feel free to use the chat or just unmute yourself and ask.
Tina Irving. I do a lot of work in Computer in Andalusia, and I wondered if the two people there from Valladolid might be interested in helping out in the south at some stage. I'm actually going down there on the 17th of November, and I'll be there until January, so maybe we can touch base even on Zoom again.
Tova.
This was so fun to listen to, and it.
Remember, Tova, you must speak slowly for Spanish people. Remember, you speak very quickly.
So nice to listen to. And I just wondered if you interviewed the families or interviewed the kids about their experiences, or how what the data were for these conclusions that you arrived at that are so fun to hear about.
I'm not sure. Maybe I don't understand.
Did you interview, or how did you collect data from the kids and the families?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Maybe Lucia can.
Yes, I interview some families and the teacher, and there were a lot of experiences. Some of them say that there were a very difficult period, and others that lived in the countryside. It was very, very easy for them because they could go out more time, and the contact with the nature was different. And also I had interviews with the teacher all days, with a lot of frequently, because we prepare a lot of proposals for them, and also because the teacher had a lot of experience in this area.
Excellent. I have a question for you both, Dario and Lucia. Were there teachers that had a negative attitude that maybe didn't want to engage in using the window or walking with the children? Because you mentioned that one of the key factors was the teacher's attitude and the teacher's willingness to collaborate.
Yes, I don't know in your country, but in Spain, when the schools closed, maybe you can think about the feeling of the teachers. It's very difficult to connect with the families. Not all the families have the technology to connect, and in our network, in our national network, work for describe some sample ways to reconnect with the nature from the home. And a lot of teachers don't look for the solution, but this teacher try to find different ways to reconnect with the children, and only with WhatsApp, for example, or something like that. The Zoom, Lucia, you use Zoom too, no? To connect with the families usually.
Yes,
And,
video calls and WhatsApp.
and the attitude of the teacher was the key question, because some teachers only connect with the families to speak about how do you do or something like that. But this teacher and Lucia go on with the program and reconnect with the nature, with the outdoors from the window. And then in the second period, the key question was the collaboration, because there are 3 teachers, Lucia, Rosa, the teacher, and the music teacher, and put together the ideas to take the opportunities in the walkings of the children. And this is not a very easy period, because they were in their homes. They can't go out. They only can go out to buy, for example, but they can't go to the school to speak together. And this is a very key question, the collaboration. And maybe if they don't collaborate, the children lose in their homes.
Yes, and I remember that when the state of alarm arrived, the first thing that the teacher thought was about families, especially the most disadvantaged families, and how these families could continue to educate and to learn their children.
They discovered the surrounding. The usually places, the park, the something like the tree in front of the house, or the birds when they come in the window. The simple things were the best adventures in this period.
Yes.
Thank you, Dario and Lucia. Really amazing. That's such a fantastic case study. And I just have so many questions and I want to know more. But we still need to leave a little bit of time for Tina. And so again, after we listen to Tina Irving, we'll have time for more questions for the entire panel as well. And so I'd like to welcome Tina. I think, is it Irving? Please correct me if I've said it wrong, but she is a graduate.
Irving.
Irving. Okay,
Irving. Irving, don't worry. And with a G on the end.
Okay. Tina Irving is a graduate of South Bank University and Harriet Watt University with a postgraduate diploma in environmental economics, policy, and risk. She has also studied at you're going to have to help me with that name as well.
La Politecnica de Madrid.
Thank you. As an undergraduate, she holds a BTEC in education and training and a diploma in freelance journalism. And currently she does not represent a university and instead is a privately funded researcher. So we're so excited to learn from Tina today and about how horseback riding in peat can contribute to adventure tourism. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, first I'd like to thank Dr. Taylor for including me in this. He's been a great support for many years, and we actually started to develop a course together. He helped me with the headings, and we're going now forward hopefully to Pearson's and the OC Open College Network in Northern Ireland. We're just working out that now. So as you say, I'm privately funded. I just do the work because I enjoy it, not to make money necessarily. But a bit about why I was so interested in that. I lived in the Highlands of Scotland for 16 years, working with the Highland Council and Scottish Natural Heritage to develop the multi-use route of the North Highland Way between John O'Groats and Durness. Wasn't easy, but we've done it, and I've actually got a meeting with the Highland Council again on Monday, even though I left Scotland best part of 6 years ago. I've been equestrian all my life since I was 6. I know horses like the back of my hand, upside down and inside out. They're all very different and individual, different types of horses, they eat different, they treat the planet differently, believe it or not, as we'll see later on. I've ridden horses all over the north of Scotland, in the forests, on the beaches, absolutely wonderful. And I've had all kinds of horses, Highland ponies and great big sundering hunters and thoroughbreds as well. So plenty of experience with the horses, what they do, and where they are likely to go and not go, as we'll see later. So plenty of experience with the horses, and enjoy them. That's the main thing. So the research really is horse excrement versus peat. Lots of work's already been done. Studies have not included what horses eat, which I think is a fundamental impact on the output. The concept of studying horses on peat bog is therefore relatively new. Bags of peat to the gardening sector in Ireland from 2024. This will have a devastating effect on the economy, especially in the Republic. There's also about £50 million to support the restoration of 335,000 acres of peat by 2025. About a percentage of that total is in the UK. The powers that be will not be able to prevent farmers, especially in remote areas, cutting peat for their own use and even selling it straight from the bog. This will be particularly the case in remote areas in Scotland, like Dunnet Head, the most northerly point of the UK mainland, which lived, and Ireland in places like Galbally in mid-Ulster. There's no way in the world they're going to be able to implement that deal, and certainly not in the west of Ireland. Certainly not in the west of Ireland. They already have enough difficulties between north and south down there. But certainly they won't be able to stop them either. I think probably like Spanish, I'm part Irish myself, so I can say the Irish tend to be a bit of rebels, which is great, I love it. So it's well known that 2 of the most important carbon sinks on the planet are oceans, i.e. plants and trees. Carbon is a very common element, and it naturally moves in and out of things by everyday processes. Trees and plants absorb CO2 in photosynthesis and use it to grow and produce oxygen. I'm probably talking to the converted here, but I thought I'd say it anyway. Animals, you and me, therefore horses, take carbon in the form of carbohydrates and breathe out CO2. Natural cycle. Carbon moves between processes all over the planet. When just the right amounts are stored and released at the same time, everything's quite acceptable. The problems start when we start to shake that balance and release more than board. The concept of micro-adventures on horseback is not a new one. They're close to home and have the same spirit as Grandad. Wonderful rides, just hour rides in Rumster Forest. Absolutely amazing. And on Dunnet Head for that matter. Fantastic. Sympathetic adventure examination of micro-adventures on horseback and how they could potentially damage peat bogs starts to show how, if done correctly, the adventures might contribute to greater environmental stewardship, helping to mitigate climate change due to peat's natural carbon sink potential. This, of course, has a knock-on effect on increasing in economic activity. I've worked with horses since I was 6, as I said, and had deep understanding not only of their nature, but what they eat and how they behave in given situations. A native pony, for example, such as a Highland pony, is ideally suited to the great outdoors. He will tread like a planet, treat it with respect it deserves, instinctively where the boggy parts are, instinctively. If he does not feel safe, he'll just refuse to go, and there's nothing you can do to make him. In that respect, he's probably a bit like a donkey. He won't shift if he doesn't want to. A thoroughbred or an Arab will not really understand the peat bog in this way, but they probably will understand the desert more. And although generally lighter in tonnage, they expect to put his hooves anywhere he feels like it. Once and if across the bog at Dunnet Head, my old Irish draft thoroughbred hunter, weighed half a ton, did put his hooves in what looked like a normal puddle and got his hind legs stuck. The bog started to stuck, but he was a canny old horse and he didn't struggle. But I won't tell you how I got him out because it's a bit sort of, probably not very nice. But anyway, I did get him out. The Scottish Outdoor Access Code was developed by Scottish Natural Heritage, now Nature Scot, in 2003. It cost over £5 million and was backed up by the MAC 2004. It's revised on a regular basis by the Highland Council officer in conjunction with the relevant minister. It's a key document to access and development of sustainable travel, but requires investment in significant update and a campaign so that other public services, such as Visit Scotland, can understand it and take it into account when they're developing projects. As you can see, probably that I'm actually from a financial background, not an environmental background at all. My background is in banking, of all things. But so the Caithness Riders Access Group for some years, the findings were it's difficult to get off the road in the places in the Highland due to restrictions placed on funding from public services and the fact that the issue is not a priority. Well, at the moment, we have problems around Loch Errible with too much traffic, thanks to NC 500. We have the Sutherland Space Hub, which is also a big problem on peat bog. Putting a space hub on peat bog, sorry, not acceptable. But Highlands and Islands Enterprise and their infinite wisdom have decided that it is. So that is a problem. So now we're trying to reroute the North Highland Way away from the coast and those two major hotspots. And that's what the meeting's about on Monday. Highlanders are hardy. They rarely shod unless they're doing road work. Short journeys on horseback were commonplace in days of yore, especially for collecting the peat. They were used as pack animals. Once the peat had been stacked, the ponies were used to take the peat off the hill. This can be seen in some days, nowadays in some places, but more common are short treks of an hour, ridden treks in the forest, on the trail, on the bogs, and this is micro-adventure in itself. In the forest, ponies are often used for assisting with tree extraction, logging, in places where machines cannot access, and being more sustainable. Ponies are ideal for this kind of work, not big horses, ponies. So they're good. Micro-adventures are an amazing way to see the Highlands of Scotland. They're great weight carriers, and so can carry a full-grown man with ease. The peace and the tranquility, the far from the madding crowds, fantastic. On horseback, you can go where a vehicle can't. And of course, so access can still be a problem. Often the tracks are typically only sheep tracks with opportunity for doing serious groundwork to improve matters, this would not be beneficial to the peat bog in any case. We don't want to be digging it up when we don't have to. Typically ride-outs or hack rarely more than an hour, but 2 8-day tracks are not unusual. In the past, the British Horse Society has offered riding challenges across deserts in the Middle East and other destinations. Horse riding has been environmental as well as economic impact. And it could be dangerous not only for the horse and rider, but for the bog. So, the UK's peat stores 3 times as much carbon as its forests, but the majority are degraded are emitting CO2, which drives the climate crisis. So stated The Guardian in May 2021. In these days, this is a real crisis. The speed at which climate change is affecting our planet is phenomenal. The Kyoto Agreement of 2005 was deemed a success and its 2012 targets. This was by the Paris Agreement in 2015. Small actions, so the study in microadventures on peat and actually implementing the actions can make a difference. In other words, we don't want study after study after study. We want action on it, which is what we, the Highland Council and I continue to do with the North Highland Way, despite no public cash, that is to say, but just the Highland Council very generous with their time, very, very generous with their time and effort in getting this project off the ground, when originally we wanted it as a community project, but it just was not feasible at all. So backing this up and thinking about, not only about effects of horses' hooves on peat bog, but also the effects of their excrement on it, if you like. But obviously, well, very much, but that's not the point. So as a result of that, I'm a member of the local gardening club in Portadown as a base and to share ideas. They're actually coming round to the idea. They think I was mad at first,
Tina,
but I've got test beds outside in my garden. Yeah, I've got test beds out in my garden, which I test every other week. See what comes up in the spring. We've got daffodils in there at the moment, 3 species of daffodils. So what comes out of these different types of soil, the Moy and from Galbally in Mid-Ulster. And the Moy is Armagh, so it's quite a distance away and the soil is completely different. And the horses I chose are completely different as well. So I think that wraps it up. So we'll see how we get on with the test bed. You can see it on Green Tourism, www.greentourism.online, and you can see us as well, so you can go cycling, walking and horse riding on our challenges. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Tina. That was really, really fascinating. Are there questions from the audience? Feel free to use the chat or to just speak up.
Probably nobody's ever thought about it before.
I actually had some questions. Is there any formal action or behavior to kind of promote the idea of these pony trips into the Highlands as a way of actually conserving or preventing urban sprawl or anything in those Highlands and to help protect those peat bogs?
Not at the moment, not as far as I'm aware. Natural heritage will be the natural nature spot will be the obvious answer to that. I'm pretty sure they haven't done anything. Otherwise, I would know. I mean, I get my freedom of information requests on a regular basis, and they're very good about that. But I haven't seen anything come through. I mean, they will be the natural people to do it, not the Highland Council. So no, I haven't come across anything at all. But I would be quite happy if somebody wanted to present that idea to Nature Scott to do that piece of research. And to probably, being from universities and funded, you probably get a lot more success than I would. Dr. Taylor in particular, and Helena will probably have more UHI and after would have more luck than I would. Although I have to say that Jelena and Dr. Taylor are very good at posting my pieces. 20 years of collaboration with the Highlands, with the Highland Council. Quite an achievement, really. Especially as I don't have any public funding.
It sounds like quite an undertaking, and thank you so much for sharing all your insights with us today. And I find it simply amazing that I didn't realize that peat bogs were some of the largest carbon sinks in the world. And so it sounds like microadventures can be an extraordinary way to maybe help preserve and conserve them, while also monetizing and providing that local stimulus, economic.
Well, exactly.
Surrounding areas.
Exactly.
So, thank you.
You know, be great. Thank you. Thank you.
We do have time now to open up questions for all of the presenters here today. So if there's any final questions or comments or insights you have for Bo, Dario, Jill, Carola, Manuel, and for Tina, now is your time. And again, feel free to just speak freely or put your questions in the chat, and also presenters can also ask. I think I see a question from Joe. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi folks. I'm wrestling with technology here. I'm on two conferences at once. So I'm on the International Council of Active Aging conference in I think that's. I wanted to ask Jill and Manuel. Great presentation, and thank you, Tina, and everybody else that presented today. Just on your research, did it come across any differences in the themes in relation to age? Jill and Manuel.
Well, to be honest, I'm sure there are differences according to age, but it's not something specifically we have looked at in our research. But you would imagine that there would be some differences. I'm just trying to think of any articles we came across. There would have been some on aging or older or different age groups of adventurers, but we didn't specifically look at that. Carola, can you recall any that we looked at?
I think we had some contributions or some articles that mentioned that after a life where people function in their families, when they are then developing outdoor or adventurous activity that they follow regularly, that this is then an aspect that let them flourish in life, that they really find a new idea how aging could look like, healthy aging could look like. So we had some articles mentioning this. So aging, outdoor activities and flourishing was something that has been mentioned quite often.
Great, thank you very much. I look forward to reading your work.
Just had a quick look at our Mendeley folder, and there are quite a lot of there's quite a lot of research on older people and adventures, which I wasn't aware of. And there's also one about older people's micro adventures. Maybe I can just share that in the chat with you. Just add.
Your research, Joe, is about aging, isn't it? Aging and
yeah, over 50s, and they don't consider anybody over 50 to be. We're all aging. I mean, every minute that passes by, we all age. But the question around it is the motivations of older adventures is really what I'm looking at. But yeah, some interesting stuff. I've only done a first round of analysis, and I'm just really interested in the terminology you used around your themes. And the idea of peace of mind. What was the term you used, Jill?
Flourishing, was it?
Flourishing, yeah. That's going into my research. Thanks very much.
It's not our term. I'd love to say, oh yeah, we've come up with.
No, I consider it stolen anyway. Here, I'll reference it, but it's stolen. It's great. Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. That was a great question. I see a hand from Tova.
Is this microphone better? So I just wanted on Joe's comment about age. So Joe, you only interested in the old. I was thinking of the 5 databases that you used in search, you didn't include Eric. Is that correct? And perhaps if one used Eric, you would have more hits on adventure as children. But if
okay,
then maybe that's not.
But perhaps, yeah, we used 5 databases. So we think that meant that we did a fairly comprehensive search. But yeah, you're right. We obviously didn't look at other databases that could have been relevant, but we chose the databases, specifically Scopus and Web of Science, based on the fact that they are what we turn to a lot when we're looking at adventure-related research. So we find that a lot of publications are on those databases. They're pretty comprehensive actually. And what we found in looking at the other databases like PsycInfo and Sport Discus was it was fine, but there were a lot of duplications in those. A lot of the systematic reviews that we've looked at, some only use a couple of databases. There's 1 or 2 of the adventure studies that use more than that. But I suppose we anticipated that if we used a wider range of databases, we might end up with a lot of duplications. But actually, yeah, I mean, by all means, what was if you wouldn't mind putting into chat that database, it would be quite interesting to maybe check that in comparison to the findings that we eventually decided to review, the 125 documents. That would be really helpful. Thank you. You're on mute, Jasmine.
Thank you, Jill. We have a question from the chat. This is a question for Lucia and Dario. I work in a school myself. I'm wondering how the process in introducing the outdoors as an opportunity to schools and families. So I think they'd like to know a little bit more about the process that you used.
Yes, because well, you know, sorry, do you listen me?
Yep.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
In the schools, the surroundings, the playgrounds, the very close places to the school were the most I don't know, the best resource for the teachers, and it's very easy to work with the families if the teacher speak with them and have a lot of meetings and explain the work, because usually here in Spain, you know, the people think that the weather is good all the year, but the people here, when maybe sometimes drop a little rain or something like that, and the people goes to home, because usually the weather is good, and the teacher have to explain to the families for understand why the outdoors is better place for learning, like the playgrounds or something like that, or nor for example, the classroom or something indoor.
Yes, I think that it's like a conviction of the teacher, because he wants to be in outdoors. So for her, the contact with the families and dedicate time to explain the families the importance of go to the nature and educate families in this area is very important for her. Is the most important, because thanks to it, after she can work with the children.
Right, thank you.
Thank you for all the comments in the comment box or the chat box. And I think we have time for another question, if there's any more from the audience. Tova.
Well, I would love it that we're playing. Oh shoot. I really love it that we're playing with the micro adventure topic in this webinar. And it comes back to another question that the conference folks were batting around, which was how should we do a conference that will preserve some of those adventure elements that are important to how we do our adventure work together. I'm just wondering if there are any thoughts that people have now from this webinar about how we can infuse adventure into a micro adventure on the screen.
So what I heard was presenters, how might we continue to infuse adventure into our micro adventures? Tova, is that kind of what you said? We had a little bit of a hard time hearing you. Sorry. So I tried to capture what I think you said, but I'm not so sure.
Okay, do you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, my third microphone. Okay, so the question was, is there anything we're learning from today's webinar about how we can infuse micro adventures into this forum for us as a meeting place to preserve some of those things that we're lost by the inability to meet face to face? Just wondering if there's something we can do, if we can create a micro adventure on this screen together at another time.
Yeah, I think it'd be worth continuing the conversation, absolutely, because there seems to be, well, I know we always talk about adventure tourism and recreation growing and growing, but really with micro adventures and the pandemic, it's really kind of strengthened and facilitated that growth and made people realize that they can have adventures of whatever kind. They can be very mild adventures, but they can have adventures on their doorstep. And so maybe, a bit like domestic tourism at the moment is gaining prominence. I think, the micro adventure will continue to be important for those people that have realized that actually doing stuff outdoors and people who are not used to doing activities outdoors that have got into the natural environment in their local area. I think, that could be a trend, hopefully, that will continue and will really help us balance our lives and maintain or even improve our overall well-being. So it would be great to actually continue this as a kind of a discussion and maybe some collaborative projects in the future where we're, kind of exploring it from different perspectives.
I think the term adventure can frighten some people. It puts people off because a lot of people that aren't in the know, they think about it in the context of adrenaline fueled and risk, when it doesn't need to be. And micro adventure offers more of that. There's one place I go swimming in regularly here in Ireland in the sea. It's called the 40-foot. And during the lockdown, when there was a reprieve or a break, I counted hundreds of people swimming of all ages and embracing the sea. Even in February, you know, January when it was freezing cold and it was Baltic. Now I was in snorkeling and swimming by a group of people, and they stopped to talk to me, you know, and they're chatting away to me. I'm snorkeling and they're wearing swimming togs, and the water temperature was 8 degrees, and they're chatting away. And I think it's going to increase people's resilience, people's physical toughness as well as mental toughness. And I personally speaking, I think it's a brilliant thing. I get a lot out of outdoor adventure. I'm not a hard adventurer, I'm a soft adventurer, but I get a lot out of it, and I want to see more people getting more out of it more often. That's just a comment.
I think there you mentioned something very, very important. This is what I think sometimes when we are talking about microadventures, we also have somehow to define anyway the Q element of microadventure, because otherwise everything could change into an adventure. And what you just mentioned, Joe, these pushing limits, this is a very individual, very subjective experience to make something, to just leave your comfort zone and to develop personally. So I think this is very, very important, that there is also a little bit this aspect of unpredictability, of somehow interacting with a dynamic nature that is not completely domestified. And this is, I think, that we have to do in the future, to define a little bit more what we think is really a basic, a very fundamental element of adventure in general. And then we can also speak about microadventures, if you know what I mean, because I don't think that everything is a microadventure, but I think we can all have a lot of microadventures in life, and that would also enrich our lives. Sorry, I didn't want to cut off the discussion.
This is an absolutely fantastic discussion, and I love how you mentioned how we have to really think about what do we mean by adventure, and then how do we incorporate it in. I know we have one person who has been waiting very patiently to ask a question, and I want to make sure we allow Nora the time to ask her question, and then because of time, I'm going to soon wrap us up. Nora, what is your question?
Thank you. I actually had two, but probably there is no time for that. One question was, but maybe I wait for the paper to come out, about the identity, about Jill's, Manuel's, and Carola's prospective paper, and the research you did about identity development and individual identity and community identity. I could really use it in my PhD. So if you write the paper within half year, that would be great. And the other, which is, so I don't know whether there is time about you explaining a little bit what you mean by identity within that context. And my other question was, I was wondering whether these microadventures, especially based on Dario's and Lucia's presentation, whether these microadventures are also a tool to provide more equitable access to adventures, because we know that in adventure and tourism, there is still kind of a lot of inequalities, especially in the UK. I only know about hill walking, and in the UK, that there is hardly any ethnic minorities who do hill walking. And I was wondering whether these microadventures, when you don't need a car to get to somewhere, you don't need that equipment, can have this impact, and whether there is any research or you are planning any research on this. So if you don't have time for my questions, I will wait for the papers to come out.
Should I maybe say something about identity, because this is a little bit the topic I am familiar with, but I can't say too much about it now, but what is important in our context is, I think that identity is always made up by different layers, and these layers are formed and stabilized by being challenged. This is really a very fundamental and very important aspect of identity, that the identity is growing the whole life long. And so it is growing by being challenged. And in the frame of outer activities, but this is only, of course, one activity, yeah, it's an easy way to leave comfort zones, to be challenged, to think about how to solve problematic situations. And you do this alone as an individual, but always also an interaction with others that maybe share the same space and share the same values. So individual identity and collective identity is completely interlinked, and both are this different aspects of one process, in fact. So in fact, everything that we are talking about concerns very much the individual identity. And as people are growing, flourishing, maybe more aware about their competences, they also develop a better understanding of the community around them. So normally you can say that by growing personally, you are also becoming a more mature member of society and community. So to make it short, I hope that you can follow what I'm saying. I think everything that we are talking about is very much linked to identity development from the young child on till we grow and become hopefully happy older people.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'd like to say a special thank you to all the presenters today, and for everyone who has zoomed in for all around the world. If you could, before we depart, could everyone please write in the chat what microadventures mean to you? You can give an example, or you could write it out in whatever way. But please, everyone in the audience and presenters as well, what are microadventures to you? And as you're writing in there, I just want to sum up, and I want to thank Bo for talking to us about his ruminations about backyard travel, as he has made the journey from academia to a different phase in his life, and creating a sense of perception and romanticizing the practical. I'd like to also thank the folks who did the systematic review, such a huge and encompassing and exciting research. I cannot wait to read the full paper. And then I also appreciate the ideas about what are the barriers regarding microadventures and adventure, and are we romanticizing the idea of adventure without mentioning or studying what some of those negative impacts might be, or some of the ways, the management implications that must be out there. And again, thank you, Dario and Lucia, for sharing with us your case studies of helping children connect with nature and helping to kind of limit some of the horrors that we were facing within the COVID pandemic. And my mind turned to different theories that we used to learn about, called biophilia, attention restoration theory, about the power of how nature can be a healer, a soother, and a place for imagination to flourish. And again, Tina, thank you for sharing your case study of the Highland ponies and another way to conceptualize microadventure. And I'm so excited to see in the chat all the different ways that microadventure might manifest in your own life, and the ways in which and the meanings that they have for you. So thank you all so much for being here. And we look forward to the next webinar, which will be November 17th at 1500 hours, and where we will learn about and critique the idea of the philosophical debate on the marginal place of human beings in the world, with a particular focus on how different ways of seeing and thinking about being, ontology, and the ways that the more than human world might inform our actions as agents in this world. So thank you very much. And are there any other final comments? Yelena, do we need to remind them anything else? She's like, no, we're good to go. So thank you all. Please stay in touch. It was a pleasure to see you again after, I think, several years and many, many months. So lovely. I'll see you all in a couple weeks. Bye-bye, y'all.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for everyone's good work.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, y'all.
Ooh.
We did it.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it was good.
Thank you. We should stop recording.
Oh, yes. Yeah, let me see how to do this.
Let's see.